Hey guys! So today we are doing a standalone lesson on arguing because, fun fact, about an entire hour of every day is spent doing one thing with our families. Can you guess what it is? Arguing. Research shows that we average around 6 arguments a day with our family members. Really. That's an average of 42 arguments a week. But it does not stop there. We argue about 180 times a month with our families. That's over 2,000 arguments a year. That's a lot of arguing. And that's only for normal families. That's not like my girls who like to argue every 30 seconds about something. Might be that way in your household too. So if you're anything like me, you find yourselves arguing with other people or listening to other people argue or getting caught up in arguments you don't want to be in a whole lot. People argue over everything, things like sports, politics, family stuff, friendship drama, what is ultimately the best Billie Eilish song, or maybe even if LeBron is the best basketball player of all time, or if it's Michael Jordan. There's all kinds of things that people argue about. You might feel like you spend a ton of your conversations with other people just arguing. Seriously, okay? Stop and think about the last argument you got into or one that you witnessed with someone else. Was it this week? Was it this morning, 5 minutes before you walked in the door today? What was it about? Something really big and important, or something seemingly pointless? Either way, I know how you feel. Because honestly, I've been there more times than I can count. Today, my video recording is happening on Wednesday, okay? You guys are going to watch it on Sunday, but it's happening today on Wednesday. Yesterday, last night, was the presidential debate. And I'm telling you guys, it doesn't even matter what side you were on. Those guys were not fighting fair, and they were not being respectful to each other, and the whole thing was really uncomfortable to watch. It felt very hostile and very disrespectful, and I don't know, I just felt kind of awkward about the whole thing. I don't know if any of you guys watched it, but sometimes I feel like, not sometimes, I do feel like it is our civic duty as citizens of the United States to pay attention and watch political debates and things like that. But gosh, that one was just kind of painful to watch. It was like a circus, really. And I just thought that this week was a good time to talk about arguments because not only did we witness a very odd debate between our presidential candidates, but so many people are talking about it today. So many people are arguing about it. You scroll through social media and you see, the presidential debate. You scroll through Instagram and you see, posts about people's political preferences or things like that. But not only that, we're seeing all kinds of other political issues. We're also seeing things like, should we be going back to school or not? Should we stay virtual? Should we go face to face? Should we wear masks? Should we not wear masks? Should we, all kinds of things. So there are just lots of arguments in general happening in life. And not necessarily just because it's a high political point in our year right now, but also, did y'all just see my cat? But also just because arguments are a part of life. And you need to realize that whether you realize it or not, arguments happen all around us, and they happen a lot with all kinds of different people over all kinds of different things. And honestly, it's going to be this way for the rest of your life. All you have to do is glance at social media on any given day to see people arguing over things like politics or religion or whatever to know that this is true. Arguments are everywhere you look. And I think most of us probably feel like all arguments are bad, don't we? Conflicts don't usually make you feel great or warm and fuzzy, do they? And they can be really difficult and uncomfortable to be a part of if you are part of an argument going on. In fact, I think most of us try to avoid arguing if we can, right? We may have strong opinions about things, but we don't argue them because we want to fit in and not stand out. We don't want to offend anyone or make someone upset. But here's the thing, you guys. Here's the big thing. Not all arguments are bad. Arguing can actually be really, really good if it's done in a way that is healthy and respectful. That's why I think this is a really important subject to talk about and a good time to talk about it. Because if we don't learn how to argue in a healthy way, the quality of our relationships with our friends, our family members, our teammates, the people in our small youth groups, and pretty much everybody we come in contact with is on the line. See, conflict is a part of life. And that's because relationships are a part of life. We are created to be in relationships. Whether it's a friend, a boyfriend, girlfriend, classmate, parent, sibling, coach, someone in youth group, or a random person on social media, at some point you are going to come into conflict. In other words, you're going to argue. And that can be a challenge for a lot of reasons. For starters, feelings are usually involved in an argument. People don't usually fight about something that they don't care about or that they're not passionate about. Think about it. When you fight with your parents over your grades, it's because your parents care about the grades that you get. When you fight with your best friend about the lie they told you, it's because you care that your friends are honest. When you see adults fighting about things like who should be the next president, it's because they care about choosing the best person for the job. A lot of times, we argue simply because we care a lot about what we're arguing about. Or we care about who we're arguing with. You don't want to see your friends make bad choices. You don't want your girlfriend to break up with you. You don't want your older sibling to talk to you in a disrespectful way. So you argue. Not because you want to, but because you care that much about the other person. In those cases, your feelings are an even bigger deal because, as it often happens in arguments, our feelings get hurt. Someone says something harsh or rude or deeply hurtful in the heat of an argument, and honestly, words cut deep, and those things are tough to come back from. So what do? Well, sometimes when that happens, we avoid the person altogether. We don't talk to them. We ghost them. We completely disappear. We hope that eventually the hurt feelings or the reasons why we argued will disappear also. Or maybe we do talk about it, just not to them. Instead of talking to the person we've argued with, we talk to everyone else. But that can't really get us anywhere closer to solving the issue, can it? I think one of the biggest reasons arguments can be challenging to navigate is this. The other person thinks differently than we do. Maybe you fought with a friend who thought using certain language words were okay, but you 100% believed that those words were hurtful. Or maybe you fought with a teammate because they had a totally different strategy on how to win the game. Maybe you've seen people argue in the comments section of Instagram because they had totally opposing views from one another. Regardless of who is arguing, usually this is what happens. Instead of listening to what someone else has to say or talking to them calmly about our own viewpoint or even ignoring it altogether, we jump right into an argument. Why? Because honestly, we can't understand how they could think so differently than we do. So what do? We spend our energy trying to convince them that we are right. After all, isn't that the whole point of an argument? To prove your point? To get the other person to come to your side, to win, to be right? See, I think the biggest problem we have when it comes to the way we navigate arguments is that we feel like there has to be a winner and a loser. And I don't know about you, I definitely don't like to lose. That's the mindset a lot of us have when it comes to arguments. We want to win. We want to be right. And it doesn't matter what we have to say or do to make sure at the end of it that we come out on top. But what if that's the problem that's holding us back? What if arguing to win isn't really a win at all? What if trying to be right isn't actually right? Remember what we said. Conflict happens. No matter how hard we may try to avoid it or distance ourselves from it, at some point we're going to find ourselves arguing with someone or being argued with. And because that's the case, I think it's important that we learn a better way to handle it. A way that allows us to aim for more than just being right. Today we're going to look at a verse in the New Testament of the Bible written by Jesus' half-brother named James. Did you know that James was Jesus' half-brother? James wrote a letter to a group of Christians in the early church, and there's some wisdom that's an absolute game changer when it comes to how we can handle arguments. Check it out. James says in chapter 1, verse 19, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." Notice the word James uses here, the word everyone. So basically, James came out of the gate. This is chapter 1, verse 19. So James comes out of the gate in this letter saying, what I'm about to tell you, it's for everyone. Not just the people I agree with, not just the people who think they're right, not just the people with the biggest tempers or the most passionate voices. This is for all of us. All of us. Now, because James wrote this letter to people who were following Jesus, I think the instruction is even more powerful. The message is for everyone, but it's especially important for those of us who believe in Jesus. As followers of Jesus, this is how we're supposed to communicate with other people. This is how we're supposed to argue. So what did James say we're supposed to do? First, he told us to be quick to listen. Let me say that again. Be quick to listen. In other words, when you find yourself in an argument, listen first. Do your best to hold off from speaking until you've actually made an effort to listen, to hear what the other person is saying. I think just applying this first piece of wisdom alone could solve a lot of our disagreements, don't you? So often the reason for our arguments get so heated or go on for so long is because we don't make an effort to listen to the other person, or we don't feel like they're listening to us. James followed that by telling us to be slow to speak. Now, for some of us, this one is particularly difficult. We want to speak what's on our minds all the time, but especially in an argument. The thought of not saying what we think or feel, that's crazy. But remember, slow to speak doesn't mean saying no to speaking. It doesn't mean that we just sit back and take it. James wasn't asking us not to defend ourselves or our points of view. Instead, he was asking us to pause before we do, to stop before we talk, to think before we speak. I don't know about you, but in my experience, most of the things I've regretted in arguments are things I've said without thinking about first. Taking a minute to pause, choosing to be slow to speak, could be the answer to that. If James were writing this letter today, then he might also include, be slow to text, slow to post, slow to comment, slow to talk behind someone else's back. Whatever the response may be for you, pause and think about it before you actually do it. All of this really adds up to the final thing James wrote here. Be slow to become angry. This is a total shift, you guys, in the way we usually, and our culture, approaches arguments. After all, aren't we usually arguing because we're angry? James wasn't asking us not to be angry. He wasn't asking us to ignore our feelings, but he was asking us to lead our hearts with another feeling, a stronger feeling in our arguments, and that's love. Choosing to be slow to become angry means choosing love when we want to hate. It means focusing on the person, not the point we're trying to make. It means valuing the relationship more than valuing being right. In other words, when we argue, I think we need to remember this. Care more about the person you're arguing with than the point you're trying to make. Listen, arguing happens. It is a part of life. But how it turns out really depends on how we choose to handle it. So next time you find yourself in a position to argue, what would it look like for you to care more about the person you're arguing with than the point you're trying to make? What would it look like for you to try some of what James was talking about here? To be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. I think if you do, you'll find that the way you argue and the way you feel will both change for the better. I know this isn't always easy, but I want you to give this a shot this week. I want you to memorize James chapter 1, verse 19. Commit it to memory. Hide it in your heart. Trust me, it is that important. You want this to be ready in your brain the next time you find yourself ready to argue with someone. When you memorize it, you'll think first of the verse, and it'll be a reminder of how you can handle your argument not only well, but in a loving and respectful manner. Apply it to somebody too. Think about the person in your world who needs you to actually follow James's instruction when it comes to arguing. Who do you find yourself tempted to argue with the most often? Someone in your family? A friend? A kid on your team? In your mind, put their face next to this verse. Maybe even write both down side by side and keep it somewhere where you can see it. That way, when you think of that person, you'll also think of James's words on how you can better approach them. And finally, put yourself in their shoes. This one is super tough, I know. But I want to challenge you to see more in that person that you argue with the most than just your differences. I want you to try and understand their side. This is part of being quick to listen, you guys. It's being quick to understand another person's point of view. Jesus could have won every single argument ever, but he still talked to people. He still made time to listen to people. He still made an effort to hear other people's different perspectives. And putting yourself in someone else's shoes will help you do the same thing. It absolutely does not mean that you will always agree with what they think or what they have to say. But it does mean that you'll try to understand why they think that. And it means you'll try to understand them. Remember, care more about the person you're arguing with than the point you're trying to make. You guys are going to talk a little bit about this. Those of you who are here for Sunday school are going to go break off into some smaller groups and you're going to discuss this together. Those of you that aren't, I challenge you again to put James chapter 1, verse 19 in your heart. James said, where is it on my paper? Sorry. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. I pray that in this season of heated political arguments and just all the other upheaval that's going on in our worlds, that you guys will hide this scripture in your hearts and you will choose to argue in a respectful and loving manner. Know that arguing is not always bad, that God has given us passionate views on varying things, and it's perfectly acceptable and good to discuss them. But it's always best practice for the sake of your relationship and for your own heart and your own peace to argue them in a respectful and loving manner, being slow to speak, slow to become angry, and quick to listen to what other people have to say. Blessings to all of you. I look forward to seeing those of you that I will see soon. Those that I don't see, those that are still out in virtual world, I pray for you guys daily. I love you and I miss you. Y'all take care.